So good afternoon, everyone. So last week we stepped into the hierarchy of subtle worlds. Along with King Asvapati, we broke into another space and time, not anymore the material world, but a whole series of subtle worlds. Asvapati originally saw it from our material world. He saw it as a golden ladder. But now he sees it in a different way. It's a world pile, like a huge mountain with many, many levels. And each level is a world, a plane of existence. Sri Aurobindo calls it the universe of the unknown. So I'm going to read on from line 55. The heaven hints that invade our earthly lives, the dire imaginations dreamed by hell, which, if enacted and experienced here, our dulled capacity soon would cease to feel, or our mortal frailty could not long endure, were set in their sublime proportions there, lived out in their self-born atmosphere. They resumed their topless pitch and native power, their fortifying stress upon the soul bit deep into the ground of consciousness, the passion and purity of their extremes, the absoluteness of their single cry, and the sovereign sweetness or violent poetry of their beautiful or terrible delight. All thought can know, or widest sight perceive, and all that thought and sight can never know. All things occult and rare, remote and strange, were near to heart's contact, felt by spirit sense. Asking for entry at his nature's gates, they crowded the widened spaces of his mind, his self-discoveries flaming witnesses, offering their marvel and their multitude. These now became new portions of himself, the figures of his spirit's greater life, the moving scenery of his large time walk, or the embroidered tissue of his sense. These took the place of intimate human things and moved as close companions of his thoughts, or were his soul's natural environment. Tireless the heart's adventure of delight, endless the kingdoms of the spirit's bliss, unnumbered tones struck from one harmony's strings. each to its wide-winged universal poise, its fathomless feeling of the all-in-one, brought notes of some perfection yet unseen, its single retreat into truth's secrecies, its happy sidelight on the infinite. All was found there, the unique has dreamed and made, tinging with ceaseless rapture and surprise, and an opulent beauty of passionate difference, the recurring beat that moments God in time. Only was missing the sole timeless word that carries eternity in its lonely sound. The idea, self-luminous key to all ideas, the integer of the Spirit's perfect sum that equates the unequal all to the equal one. The single sign interpreting every sign, the absolute index to the absolute. So this is what King Aswapati is experiencing with his first contact with this hierarchy of subtle worlds. You will read, Alice?
Alice?
The heaven hints that invade our earthly lives, the dire imaginations dreamed by hell, which, if enacted and experienced here, our dulled capacity soon would cease to feel, or our mortal frailty could not long endure, were set in their sublime proportions there.
Yes. So he experiences heaven hints, indications of heavenly higher worlds. Sometimes those heaven hints might invade our earthly lives, even here, just as hints. And perhaps here on earth, sometimes it's necessary for people to experience the dire imaginations dreamed by hell, terrible situations. If those things were really enacted here, if they were really acted out and really experienced here, the capacity of our body to sense and feel things, experience things, simply wouldn't be able to feel. If the intensity of some feeling that you get is too much, you just lose consciousness. Sri Moy was telling me about how she just made a little wrong movement once at Matrimandir and broke a bone here in her ankle. And she said the pain was so intense she just lost consciousness. So if for some reason we experience some very, very intense pain, that can happen. Our bodies are simply too weak to endure it, and the senses stop working. So it's either the body's capacity simply can't go on feeling it, or the weakness of our body can't bear it in one way or another. No. But there, in where King Aswapati is now, there those things were set in their sublime proportions, not in the dulled way that we experience them here. And there they get lived out in their own self-born atmosphere, the native atmosphere that they create around them. So there, unlike here on earth, again they resume their topless pitch, their highest intensity, and their original native power. And the pressure on the soul of these intense experiences, he says, is fortifying. It makes the soul stronger, having to bear those intense feelings. It's like he talks about it in the way we do engraving on metal. People can, or it used to be a way of printing before we had all the modern digital ways of printing. So onto a copper plate, the artist would use acid to draw his image, and that acid would bite into the ground of metal, so that if then you covered the plate with ink and made an impression of it on paper, you would see the picture. In order to make the picture with acid, he had to bite deep into the ground. Here it says these experiences bite into the ground of Aswapati's consciousness. They make a strong impression and leave it there. No? And they leave there in his soul the marks of the passion, the intensity, and the purity of their extremes, the extremes of experience, either of intense delight or intense suffering. The absoluteness of their single cry. Each of those experiences is unique and in its own way absolute, and it leaves that distinct, unique impression in his soul. Each of them has some special sweetness or the violent poetry that these experiences bring, of their beautiful or terrible delight. Sri Aurobindo's reminding us that experiences which can be terrible to the body or to our normal emotions and feelings, to the soul, they can be delightful. Or we can think of Sri Aurobindo's poem about when he was walking on the terrace at night, and he says, "You, Lord, you came and stung my foot." And the mind thought of a scorpion, and I was snared by the idea of the scorpion. But he said, but the soul was laughing at the touch of the beloved. So, yeah.
Bharati, Subramanya Bharati.
Yeah.
He wrote in Tamil, by touching the fire we feel the delight. People Viranayita Mandala.
Touching the fire, he feels the touch of Krishna.
Because everything is the touch of Krishna. So that's a great yogic realization. When Sri Aurobindo broke his thigh, He said, I had to struggle for a couple of days to be able to feel the ananda. The pain was so intense. He was not able to convert it into ananda immediately. Kanapan.
Because I will start from.
It's page 97, second line. All thought can
All
know.
thought can know, and widest sight perceive, and all that thought and sight can never know. All things occult and rare, remote and strange, are near to heart's contact, felt by spirit sense.
So by entering into this subtle world, his consciousness has widened enormously. No? Everything that can be known by thought, and the very widest, most absolute kind of sight perception, he could perceive. But also everything that thought and sight can never know. It's as if all knowledge becomes accessible to him. All things, occult, hidden, and rare, remote, very far away from our experience, strange, they feel, to him, they feel very close, near to heart's contact, and felt by spirit sense, not by the sense of the body, but by the sense of the spirit. Dhanalakshmi.
Asking for entry at his nature's gates, they crowded the widened spaces of his mind. His self-discoveries flaming witnesses, offering their marvel and their multitude.
Yes. So who is this they in this sentence?
And all things.
It's all these things, all these experiences and possibilities, all these things. They are asking for entry at his nature's gates. They want to enter into him. And he allows them to enter into him. And then they crowd. His soul has become so vast, the widened spaces of his soul, but all these experiences and different kinds of knowledge, it becomes crowded. All of them are offering their marvel and their multitude. All of them, it says, were his self-discoveries, flaming witnesses. A witness is somebody who can state that such and such a thing has happened. So these experiences, all these things, the fact that he experiences them bears witness to the fact of his widening self-discovery. He's discovering more and more and more about himself.
He is now become new portion of himself, the figure of his spirit's greater life, the moving of scenery of his large time God, or the embodied issue of his sense.
Continue.
He is still the place of intimate human things.
Continue to the full stop.
And moon as close companion of his thoughts, or where is soul's nature's environment.
Thank you. So all these things, these flaming witnesses of his self-discovery, they become new parts of himself. they become the figures, the images of this new and greater life which his spirit is experiencing. It's as if he's walking through time, not through our earth time, but through another kind of time and space. And all these new things become like the moving scenery as he walks through that greater, new, greater life. Or Sri Aurobindo says it in another way. He says, they became the embroidered tissue of his sense. Here, tissue is in the sense of fabric, something that's woven, no? Woven with threads going in two different directions. Or weft, yes, yeah. And the senses, in a way, are like that. They're like a kind of net which catches hold of impressions. No? So here, it's as if those sense impressions, they become part of this cloth, this wonderful fine cloth, so beautifully embroidered with experiences and perceptions and feelings. No? This all becomes part of his life. And they replace things that are intimate here in our human world. No? They are moving there in that new world as close companions of his thoughts, or they were the surroundings, the natural environment surrounding his soul, the atmosphere of his soul. Prasad.
Tireless the heart's adventure of delight, endless the kingdoms of the spirit's bliss. Unnumbered tones struck from one harmony's strings, each to its wide-winged universal voice. Its fathomless feeling of the all-in-one brought notes of some perfection yet unseen. Its single retreat into truth's secrecies, its happy sidelight on the infinite.
Yes. So there's no end to the heart's adventure of delight. The heart never gets tired of these endless new experiences. And he's experiencing the kingdoms of the Spirit's bliss. There's no end to them either. They're infinite in number. As we go through the cantos of Book 2, from time to time, Sri Aurobindo will tell us that there were 3 levels, or there were more than 3 levels. So we could count how many levels he describes in the 15 cantos of Book 2. But then it doesn't end there. When Asvapati moves into other worlds, he has more experiences. And then when we get to Book 11, and Savitri moves into the kingdoms of everlasting day, there are more and more and more and more levels are described. And I think it says, worlds of an endless bliss, crowned nature's stare. So this world stare goes on and on and on and on and on. And finally, that Godhead whom she meets there, he tells her, this choice that you want to make, you can't make it here in these worlds. You have to rise on a ladder of higher worlds until you reach a level where no world can be, the transcendent level beyond the manifestation. So we can't count all the levels that are there in this world stair. We can maybe count the ones that are referred to in the poem, but there are so many of them. And each of them represents something like a note or a tone of music. And all those tones are in harmony. They are unnumbered tones, we can't count them, struck from one harmony's strings. And each of them contributes something unique. Each has its own poise, like a great bird hovering, wide-winged poise, its place in the universe. And each has its own bottomless, measureless feeling of the all in one. And each of them is bringing different notes, notes of some perfection yet unseen, something that only that world can bring. Each one brings its own unique single retreat, its way of going deep into truth's secrecies. Each of them gives its own happy sidelight on the infinite. You can see something in full light, but if a photographer or an artist shines a sidelight, it may show you aspects of the face or the figure or whatever it is that you wouldn't see otherwise. A sidelight, it can be very, very revealing. So each of those worlds is giving a sidelight on the infinite that no other world can give. It's a unique perception. Joel.
All was found there, the uniquest dream it made, tinging with ceaseless rapture and surprise, and an opulent beauty of passionate difference, the recurring beat that moments go in time.
Mm-hmm. So in that world that Aswapati has entered now, everything could be found there. Everything that the unique, the one, has dreamed and made when he created his manifestation. And each of those things, together they are tinging with ceaseless rapture and surprise the moments. He says there are, like we have heartbeats, there's a kind of beat there in the heart of all that wonderful manifestation, a recurring beat, like in music you will have it, no? And that's indicating the moments, God's moments in that time, in that special time.
Shraddhavan, what this means, tinging?
Tinging. So, if you have a new red dress and you are so foolish as to put it in the washing machine along with your beautiful white sheets, your sheets will get tinged. They will become pink. They will not become beautifully deep red, but they will get some faint touch of color. Tinging, just a tinge. And if we look at the sky in the evening, you see tinges of so many different colors, yeah. Shapeless even, you know, faint pastel colors. So what they are tinging here, he doesn't mention colors, just giving a faint impression of ceaseless rapture and surprise. There's something particularly delightful about surprise, you know, that comes unexpectedly. And an opulent beauty, rich beauty, opulent, full of riches, of passionate difference. There's all these things are unique, different. They enjoy being different. All this is tinging the recurring beat that moments God in time. It's as if God himself has a heartbeat. There's a poem of Sri Aurobindo where he says, perhaps the heart of God forever sings, and worlds come throbbing out with every note. Ceaseless beauty and surprise. So all those things were there, but something is missing. Rita.
Only was missing the soul timeless word that carries eternity in its lonely sound. The idea self-luminous, key to all ideas, the integer of the Spirit's perfect sum, that equates the unequal all to the equal one, the single sign, interpreting every sign, the absolute index to the absolute.
So something is missing. It's like a key or a clue to all this. No? It's perhaps a word, the sole, timeless word. Maybe that's the Om. That word that carries eternity in its lonely sound. Maybe that idea, that word expresses a creative idea, and that creative idea is a key to all other ideas, a clue to the meaning and significance of all other ideas. An integer. What is an integer?
Number.
A whole number, not a fraction, a whole number.
Is it integer or integer?
I would say integer, but I don't know. Somebody can look in the dictionary and tell us next time. So it's as if everything adds up. In the Spirit's perfect sum, it adds up to one whole number. In Nolini Kantagupta's collected works, there's a nice little essay called The Mathematics of Infinity. You could have a look at that. He talks about these ideas.
Which book? Mathematics of Infinity.
Which book?
Which book?
It is in Nolini Kantagupta's selected works. There are several volumes, I don't know exactly which one, but we have in our library, and then you can look at the contents page and you can find the article that's called The Mathematics of Infinity. So he's speaking about that, the mathematics of infinity, which can equate all this manifestation, the unequal all, where everything is different and things don't match and everything is distinct and unique. No? But there is a way of equating all that to the equal one, equal in the sense of being absolutely impartial to and accepting of everything. The one who has emanated all that, this is equal. He accepts it all equally. So maybe these are all the same thing. This timeless word, this idea, this integer, and this sign. There's a single sign interpreting every sign, makes clear the meaning of all signs. And all these things form the absolute index to the absolute existence. An index, if you read a scholarly book, at the back there will be an index, a list of topics that tells you where in the book you can find each of those topics. It points out where you will find what you're interested in. Or in the case of Sri Aurobindo's collected works, Birth Centenary Library, there's one whole volume, fat volume, which is the index, no? Which shows you.
Maybe the single sign interpreting every sign is mathematics. Infinite mathematics.
Yes. And this index, we have an index finger, no?
Yeah.
It's the finger we use for pointing at.
Indicating.
For indicating things. So the index indicates, points out things. So the absolute existence, there's an absolute index. But that is not to be found in this world where King Aswapati has entered now. All these absolute things, interpreting the absolute, they are not there. It's a world somehow like our world, where the index is hidden.
The previous sentence, the recurring beat that moments God in time. Because moment is noun or verb here.
Here it's a verb. That's a nice thing about English, that we can take a word which is normally a noun and the poet can use it as a verb. And it's very suggestive, no? That recurring beat, it gets repeated, it's regular, it's rhythmical, and it indicates the movement of time, these different moments. What was I?
The mother, you were telling something about.
Yes, when we listen to the recordings she made with Huta, we hear the clock striking, no? Yes. So it is more marking the moments of God's time. And it's all music is dependent somehow on, and our lives. We also experience the heartbeats, the pulse of the blood.
Sometimes the clock strikes at the very important thing that she's saying. Have you experienced like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the cuckoo.
Yeah.
I have a photograph, among my papers, I have a photograph taken of Mother when she first moved into her upstairs room. And there she is, sitting in this bare room at a round table, and you can count 8 different clocks in the room.
But in Shraddhavan, you have a lot of clocks And one moment, in occult level, everything stops. And he's very, very interesting. He has some force, and suddenly everything comes out.
Yeah. He used to move through his rooms and see the clock, see the time, and he found clock has stopped. Next room, clock has also stopped. Went through the whole series of rooms, all the clocks are stopped. And then he said, "This is beyond a joke." And they all start again. One or two he would have put up with as a joke. But this is beyond a joke. So I think we stop there for today.
On the intrigue. That's the intrigue.
The heaven hints that invade our earthly lives, the dire imaginations dreamed by hell, which, if enacted and experienced here, our dulled capacity soon would cease to feel, or our mortal frailty could not long endure, were set in their sublime proportions there. There lived out in their self-born atmosphere, they resumed their topless pitch and native power, their fortifying stress upon the soul bit deep into the ground of consciousness, the passion and purity of their extremes, the absoluteness of their single cry, and the sovereign sweetness or violent poetry of their beautiful or terrible delight. All thought can know, or widest sight perceive, and all that thought and sight can never know, all things occult and rare, remote and strange, were near to heart's contact, felt by spirit sense. Asking for entry at his nature's gates, they crowded the widened spaces of his mind, his self-discoveries, flaming witnesses, offering their marvel and their multitude. These now became new portions of himself, the figures of his spirit's greater life, the moving scenery of his large time walk, or the embroidered tissue of his sense. These took the place of intimate human things, and moved as close companions of his thoughts, or were his soul's natural environment. Tireless, the heart's adventure of delight, endless the kingdoms of the spirit's bliss, unnumbered tones struck from one harmony's strings, each to its wide-winged universal poise, its fathomless feeling of the all-in-one, brought notes of some perfection yet unseen, its single retreat into truth's secrecies, its happy sidelight on the infinite. All was found there, the unique has dreamed and made, tinging with ceaseless rapture and surprise, and an opulent beauty of passionate difference, the recurring beat that moments God in time. Only was missing the sole timeless word that carries eternity in its lonely sound. The idea, self-luminous key to all ideas, the integer of the Spirit's perfect sum, that equates the unequal all to the equal one. The single sign interpreting every sign, the absolute index to the absolute.